On May 8, 1945, the Nazi Holocaust to exterminate the Jews had finally come to an end. But there is another genocide movement born from the same racist and radical roots. Welcome to Freedom Alive. The United States alone has lost millions of unborn babies since the first abortion facility opened in 1916. This culture of death can be traced back to one woman and continues through Planned Parenthood today. Seth Gruber is the founder and president of the White Rose Resistance and has become a national voice in this battle to end abortion. We're honored that Seth joins us to unpack the history and how we can help make a difference to stop this human genocide. I'm blessed to again be joined by co-host Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, it is tragic that many people don't know the origins of the early mindset behind abortion. We have to learn the truth.
You know, this happens all the time with our language that we see all the time in the media, and we don't even know where this all came from. And so Seth will talk about where this ideology of abortion came from, especially Margaret Sanger. It obviously begins, with Charles Darwin, then Alfred Kinsey. And some people may or may not have heard of Alfred Kinsey, but he was the father of the sexual revolution. Mm-hmm. And as Seth says, Margaret Sanger is the mother of the sexual revolution with her founding of Planned Parenthood and what we see happening today. So that helps us with a history to look beyond the platitudes and the rhetoric like choice and reproductive freedom. What we're really talking about is human genocide at a magnitude that's unfathomable.
Absolutely. It is our delight and honor to share the truth with you on this issue and others. We cannot wait to bring it to you, but our Freedom Alert is next.
Planned Parenthood continues her tragic legacy. The practice of killing unborn children and harming women can be traced back to Margaret Sanger's life, which was marred by lust, greed, eugenics, deception, and rebellion against God. Planned Parenthood is continuing its founder's life work and shows no signs of slowing down. And many women and millions of unborn children have paid the price. Sanger wrote, quote, "Our ultimate objective is unlimited sexual gratification without the burden of unwanted children." Sanger's worldview was rooted in social Darwinism, and her goal was the development of a superior race through selective population control by means of sterilization, birth control, and abortion. Sanger believed in favored races and strived to eliminate minority populations and disabled people. She considered them human weeds. This is Margaret Sanger's legacy of a culture of death.
Up next, Matt's interview with Seth Gruber.
I'm pleased to welcome Seth Gruber, and he is with the White Rose Resistance. And Seth, your organization is a very powerful pro-life organization. Tell us about what the White Rose Resistance is and how you got involved in the issue of the sanctity of human life.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah, we exist to educate the public, brutally discredit the opposition, and inspire a movement in the American church to end abortion. We believe that this is not necessarily actually the responsibility of another 501c3 doing great work. It's actually the responsibility of the church. And that's the heritage of our faith, is that where the gospel was proclaimed, social transformation followed. And we've kind of lost our heritage and our calling. And so I've been in this fight for a long time. I was raised in the pro-life movement. My mother was the executive director of a pregnancy resource center in the late 1980s and was waddling around the pregnancy center in 91 while pregnant with me, saving babies, loving on moms and dads, and stepped down to homeschool me and my sisters. I grew up doing the Walk for Life every year, raising funds for the pregnancy center. And then my senior year of high school, I did my senior project on abortion and saw aborted baby photos for the first time. Mutilated little children at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks gestation, first trimester. And that was really the turning point of my life. So I've been speaking publicly on stages since 19. I'm 32 now. And we launched the White Rose Resistance right after the overturning of Roe versus Wade providentially. And we're now the fastest growing pro-life organization in America.
Well, your experience in seeing that video, the pictures, the images of the aborted babies is similar to mine. Back in early 80s, I saw the movie, the documentary, brand new at the time, called Assignment Life, and it showed the actual first trimester abortion. And then it also showed the assembly of the baby body parts when they were trying to make sure they got all the different parts. And I was a pastor. So you're wanting to raise up the church. I was a pastor at the time that was not speaking out. I was a pastor that knew a lot about a lot of issues of the Bible, but not on this issue. And so people watched this documentary, and they invited pastors to come to see it. And I was one of about a dozen. And that impacted my life, to see what abortion's really like, that this really is a human life. It's not what the media or the rhetoric of choice or reproductive freedom, all that's just cover. But when you really look at the reality of it, this is a brutal taking destruction of an innocent human life. I was stunned, as a pastor. I was wondering, where have I been? This culture war was going on since 1973. And we're talking about 1983 is when I saw this documentary 10 years later. And that changed not only my pastorate, but it also changed the direction of my future life, going into law school, and then eventually founding Liberty Counsel. One of our missions and our ultimate goals, among others, was the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So we really rejoiced on that day, 10:10 Eastern Time, on June 24, 2022, when the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So that was the beginning of the White Rose resistance after that historic moment.
Yeah, that's right. I am a big believer, Matt, that we in the American church are unfortunately repeating the error that caused the Lord to speak through the prophet Hosea in Hosea 4:6. And he said, "My people, says the Lord, are being destroyed for lack of knowledge." Actively, in the present, here and now, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. And brother, I've had the blessing and honor of preaching and ministering in some of the biggest pulpits and most engaged churches in America. And the number one response I've gotten after about 35 to 40 churches in the last 15 to 16 months has been, "Seth, I've never heard any of this before." And I go into the hidden history of the secular moral revolution, the links between Kinsey and Seekis and Planned Parenthood and Hugh Hefner and Playboy and the American Eugenics Society and Planned Parenthood's first board member, who was part of the KKK, who was called a spiritual father of Nazi Germany, Sanger's earliest writings and how that's manifesting today. And we actually don't understand how we got here. That's actually the problem, is that Christians in America don't understand the ideology of the enemy, how the enemy operates, and the people he's raised up to advance his ideology in the public square. We have a culture of death today, Matt, where the high priests of secular humanism are more zealous and dogmatic for their father's revolution than we are for our father's revolution and righteousness in the public square. Christianity is the first revolution. Go to the very ends of the earth, to the uttermost. The Abraham Kuyper, there's not one square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not scream mine. And we've been abdicating from this culture war, and look at the results. Look at the insanity and evil that's been escalating and integrating into the society so quickly in the last 5 years. And so, hey, I do activism in the public squares. I speak on the university campuses, but our focus is to reawaken the blood-bought bride of Christ in America.
Well, you're doing a great job. Let's begin at the beginning. One of my great friends, late Dr. Judith Reisman, was an world expert on Alfred Kinsey, and she taught me so much about him. Let's begin with the beginning. Obviously, you begin with Charles Darwin, but let's talk about the sexual revolution beginning with Alfred Kinsey.
All roads lead to Alfred Kinsey and the Institute for Sex Research, renamed the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. So he publishes his book, Sexuality in the Human Male, in I believe like 48, thank you. And then Sexuality in the Human Female in 57. And he argues that children are sexual from birth. And that the normal sexual behavior of the normal American male is to sleep with animals, to engage in homosexual sex, and to cheat on his wife. And the normal sexual behavior of the normal American female is to do the same. And he got this interview by interviewing pedophiles and rapists serving lifetime prison sentences. And for the women, he interviewed prostitutes and pimps and said, this is the normal sexual behavior of the normal American female. He then smears the greatest generation right after they're coming back from the war as a bunch of hypocrites and sexual deviants to justify the revolution he wanted to build. Kinsey once said, the entire army of religion is our central enemy, end quote. The whole goal was to attack Christianity and bring about new norms in the society because he knew that would be the way to usher in the liberal, utopian, Marxist revolution. But where did he get that data from? One guy named Rex King, who literally raped dozens of children, and he made it sound like he interviewed multiple men in Sexuality of the Human Male on Table 34, where he tracks the orgasms of children between 10 months old and about 12 years old. But it was all one dude, a rapist pedophile. He interviewed a Nazi pedophile rapist named Dr. Fritz von Balusek, who was running a concentration camp in Poland and somehow avoided the Nuremberg trials, Matt. We don't know how that happened. In his trial, about 11 months after Kinsey died in Berlin, Judge Berger got his sex diaries where he wrote down his accounts of raping children, including his own offspring, by the way, Matt. And the judge said, this is no longer human. What was all this for? To tell Kinsey about? And then Dr. Fritz admitted in the hearing, he said, yeah, Kinsey himself asked me for that. And when the FBI went to Kinsey to try to get Dr. Fritz von Balusek's diaries, he refused to give them over in this investigation of this Nazi child pedophile rapist who was called the most infamous rapist pedophile in the criminal history of Berlin, according to German journalists at the time. That's where the data comes from that justifies the premise that children are sexual from birth. And then that becomes ensconced in all of what is today called comprehensive sexuality education that's bringing all these angry moms and dads to school board meetings because of the obscene pornographic sex ed. That's where it all comes from. And by the way, today, Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of pornographic comprehensive sexuality education in America's schools.
Yeah, really, it all starts with Kinsey. And his idea was to obliterate the very notion of God. And the best way to do that is to have unrestrained human sexuality and human sex. In fact, even in their sex institute that one of their original people that was working with Kinsey founded in San Francisco, they required people to have sex with each other as a requirement of work. Judith has the actual book that these people published of what they were doing. It's literally pornographic. And this was published. These people should have been prosecuted. Kinsey should have been prosecuted for just publishing Table 34 because it shows this assault on children. And so this is how Planned Parenthood ultimately was founded, is in that vein of ideology. Charles Darwin, Alfred Kinsey, and Planned Parenthood expands it. Hugh Hefner launched Playboy. He was a virgin in college until he read Kinsey. Then he launched Playboy. So you have all that sexual revolution, and now it is globally funded and distributed through Planned Parenthood, both in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, and Matt, here's an interesting little factoid for your listeners. Some people listen to me, and you're an awesome brother, man. You know this stuff. You're incredible. And they might say, Matt, Seth, you guys are kind of weirdo kooks. You're a little bit Alex Jones, a little bit conspiracy theory. Planned Parenthood is in the abortion business. What are you talking about? Porn in the schools curriculum? They just provide free condoms, pap smears, and abortions. No, Christian, you have been asleep at the wheel. This has always been an integrated revolution. These things always go together. Let me prove it to you. When Roe v. Wade was overturned in 1973, a journalist approached Dr. Alan Guttmacher, the namesake of the Guttmacher Institute, Planned Parenthood's research branch, who became president when Sanger died. And the journalist asked him, Matt, Dr. Guttmacher, how are we going to protect and maintain this victory for women's reproductive bodily autonomy? You know what he said? He responded with 2 words: sex ed. So from the mouth of one of the most famous Planned Parenthood presidents, the way you protect abortion on demand at the federal level is through sex ed to minors in America's public schools. Don't take our word for it. Take the word of the president of Planned Parenthood, y'all.
Yes, and Margaret Sanger, she was someone who exported that globally. She wanted to import and she wanted to expand Charles Darwin's idea
of a favored race. So you remove some of what she would call weeds of humanity from that by sterilization, by contraception, and then by abortion. So that's why they put these abortion clinics in these minority neighborhoods, particularly African American and Hispanic, other neighborhoods, to eliminate certain races that she considered to be disfavored races.
That's right.
And it's Margaret Sanger who wanted to have this unrestrained human sexuality, but to eliminate certain categories of people based upon race, ethnicity, and disability.
That's right. In the introduction to her Negro Project, which she launched in 1939, she said the mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, are still breeding carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. And so she hired regional coordinators called Negro Project directors to propagandize birth control in majority black enclaves and to put her birth control clinics, like Planned Parenthood clinics today, Matt, within walking distance of majority black neighborhoods. And we have some of the writings, actually, of some of her Negro Project directors, thanks to the work of Dr. George Grant, a mentor of mine and the author of Grand Illusions, The Legacy of Planned Parenthood, published in 1988, who unveiled more of this than any other author ever had. And one of those Negro Project directors working for Margaret Sanger, y'all, said, quote, "There is a great danger that we will fail because the Negroes think that this is a plan for their extermination. Hence, let's appear to let the colored run it." Let's appear to let the colored run it. So they don't think that this campaign is actually focused on eradicating them. Like, guys, these is the writings of people on the payroll for Planned Parenthood. So what Matt is telling you is incredibly accurate. This was a eugenics movement. Margaret Sanger coined the term birth control. And she said, eugenics without birth control seems to us a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit. So she would call people she didn't want reproducing unfit. Hitler might have called them Lebensunwertensleben, life unworthy of life. But it's the same ideology, is that the strong should survive and the weak should die. And the elite strong class get to determine what qualities are necessary or that you must be in possession of in order to have the right to reproduce and the right to life. And if you don't meet the liberal establishment's litmus test for personhood and rights, you're screwed.
And it all goes back to Charles Darwin's book, Origin of the Species. And the full title is Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races. Preservation of favored races. And then in his subsequent book, The Descent of Man, he then elaborates what he means by favored races. And that ideology was part and parcel of Margaret Sanger, Adolf Hitler, and many others.
That's right. Yeah. And Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, actually coined the term eugenics. Yeah. That's where the term comes from. And he credits reading his cousin's book as the kind of turning point of his life and his revolution. He then mentored Havelock Ellis, the Alfred Kinsey of England, a real sexual kook and weirdo, who became Margaret Sanger's number one political and sexual influence. If you read Sanger's book in 1932 called My Fight for Birth Control, it's like, I kind of start blushing reading how she talks about Havelock Ellis. I mean, she refers to him as like the greatest human she ever knew, the most influential person on her. So listener, let me just tell you really quickly, ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. Look how quickly we went from Darwin, man is a monkey. He came from, we're animals actually. So the survival of the fittest. Apple don't fall far from the tree, to his cousin who founds the eugenics movement and coins the term, who then mentors Havelock Ellis, the Kinsey of England, who becomes the number one political and sexual influence on the mother of the sexual revolution, the patron saint of feminism, and the founder of Planned Parenthood. Look how quickly we went from the premise, man is an animal, to weed out the unfit, to sexual chaos, to child sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. And though, you know, when you look at the whole transgender movement now, the LGBTQ, the puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mutilated surgery, it goes right back to Havelock Ellis, who back then was promoting this idea of homosexuality and even what they now call transgenderism. And that was something that Margaret Sanger adopted as well.
That's right, Matt. Man, I love you, brother. You are a son of Issachar. The Bible talks about the men who understood the times, and so they knew what Israel ought to do. And so, listener, listen, check this out. Planned Parenthood is still in the business of sterilizations. They were launched as literally the core and center of the eugenics movement. Like Margaret Sanger shared office spaces with the American Eugenics Society being run by Madison Grant in 1921. When the American Birth Control League was founded, all of the funding and board members of Planned Parenthood were all part of the American Eugenics Society or the eugenics movement. So guys, Planned Parenthood is still sterilizing people today. Why? Because they're the second largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in the land of the free and the home of the brave. What happens when you go down the entire path of transgenderism? What's the final iteration? Sterilization. Yeah. Some things don't change. And seemingly, tragically, brother, the thing that has seemingly not changed is that the church will not awaken. The church is still asleep at the wheel because we have forgotten that this culture war, okay, it's a proxy war. It's a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. And when you read the writings and motivations of these sexual, cultural, Marxist revolutionaries, they're very clear in their writings, Matt, that what they are doing is religious in nature. They want to replace Christianity with the religion of humanism. I shared that Kinsey quote with you. He said, the entire army of religion is our central enemy. Margaret Sanger once said, birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian church. And you go, wait, I thought birth control was to help poor families not have too many kids so they can be a better parent to the kids they already have. And the woman who coined the term birth control is saying, no, we radicals like it as a way to undermine Christianity. Christian, wake up. The culture war that you may have been refusing to contend with was actually a refusal to preach against false religion.
Yeah. And it's actually designed to eliminate the church, just in the same way that Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, and that's her term, that's why I use it, that's her term.
That's right.
Why that was actually being done to eliminate the Black population, and shamefully, she actually elicited the support of some Black pastors to promote the Negro Project that ultimately was designed to eliminate the Black population. So, this right here is ultimately designed to eliminate the very notion that there is a God, to destroy the church and destroy religious freedom, and anything that gets in its way is the enemy and the target. Speak up to pastors that are saying, well, I really appreciate all that you're saying here, but I can't speak about this in church because I'm going to offend people. There's going to be people in my congregation that may have had an abortion and they might be upset. Talk to that pastor.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. Well, listen, Pastor, your silence on abortion does not spare your men and women hurt. It spares them healing. Okay, Pastor, I am not a pastor, but I have had the blessing and honor of preaching in so many pulpits. Let me just speak to you right now, Pastor. Your silence is deafeningly loud. You are sparing the post-abortive men and women in your congregation healing. And they actually need the truth. They actually have to come to terms with the fact that they helped kill their child before they can experience true and real forgiveness, healing, and freedom. If they continue to rationalize their sin as healthcare and bodily autonomy, they actually can't come to full healing and forgiveness. You have an obligation as a pastor to speak the truth in love with grace, yes, but to speak the truth nonetheless. And I want you to think about all the post-abortive men and women in America. Millions. If their pastors would speak and preach the full counsel of God and righteousness with grace and truth, how many men and women could be set free and healed? Some people who've never told anyone about their abortion, they can be such a powerful voice for life in a culture of death if they can come to healing and forgiveness. Secondly, you're going to offend people. Okay, I have no patience for that, Matt. Honestly, you should probably surrender your pulpit, Pastor. I think of the rich young ruler, right? Think of how not winsome and not strategic Jesus was, Pastor, right? I want to follow you. Okay. I'm going to put your sin and your idol front and center in your face. right? Go give away all your wealth and come follow me. Lastly, this is child sacrifice to pagan demons. Read your Bible. Jesus sees no distinction between babies in the womb and babies outside the womb. So what we're doing in America is no different than the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Polynesians, the ancient Hindus and Arabs, the Greeks. What we're doing is no different. We've just professionalized it and profiteered it in a way in America that would have made the primitive Canaanites blush. And it's your job as the pastor to awaken the sheep to be salt and light in a culture of death.
Well, Seth, I couldn't say it any better, so I have nothing else to add to that. Well said. Thank you for your work at the White Rose Resistance. And for people who want to be able to reach you, you have a website, SethGruber.com. That's SethGruber.com. Seth, thank you for your call and your intensity to wake up the body of Christ. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Matt. You guys can follow me at the Unaborted with Seth Gruber podcast or Seth Gruber show coming soon. And Matt, be faithful. We're grateful for you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. God bless.
Matt, this story reminds me that often evil does some of its best work in plain sight. And I listened to Seth, and he's talking about the last 18 months, right? He's spent his whole life talking about this issue. 35 to 40 churches, the number one response is, Seth, I've never heard any of this before.
Yeah, which is a real indictment to the church, in particular to pastors that are not educating people in their congregation about these critical issues. And as Seth, so eloquently said toward the end of the interview, you need to be able to speak out on this, because by withholding information, you're withholding healing. Mm-hmm. Not only withholding healing, you're also withholding information that otherwise might save a person's life, a person that they might kill, and their own life, which they will ultimately damage by taking the life of a child that God has given them the blessings to be able to birth. So by remaining silent, you're actually causing harm rather than avoiding controversy. You're causing harm, and we'll all be held accountable for that.
There is a price not to participate in this culture war, whether it be the church, Big C, our individual churches, or us. We have to be involved. The truth, the origins in this are just unbelievable. And so many of us just don't know it. It's our joy. It's our honor. We will always, always bring you the truth on every one of these episodes, no matter the issue that we're talking about. Well, in closing, remember Deuteronomy 30, verse 19b, which says, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your family may live. Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.